Before language had words for love, before humans had names for the stars, we had monsters. Not the monsters of movies, not the ones invented to sell tickets, the original ones. The ones born in darkness, in fear, in the earliest fires, humanity ever lit. The question is, what were they really? And why, across every ancient culture on Earth, did the first thing humans ever imagine look almost exactly the same? Welcome to Mythic Origins. Today we are going back, further than ancient Greece, further than Egypt, further than any civilization most people have ever heard of. We are going back to the very first human beings who sat around a fire and told stories about things that wanted to eat them in the dark. Archaeologists, anthropologists, and mythologists have spent decades studying humanity's oldest stories, oldest cave paintings, and oldest ritual sites. And what they've found is extraordinary. The first monsters humans ever imagined were not random. They were not accidents of culture. They followed a pattern, a deeply human pattern that tells us something profound about who we are and what we have always been afraid of. This is the story of humanity's first nightmares. Let's begin with a fact that most people never stop to consider. For the vast majority of human history, there was no writing, no books, no records. Just fire, darkness, and the human mind trying to make sense of a world it couldn't control. The earliest evidence of human storytelling doesn't come from scrolls or stone tablets. It comes from cave walls. In places like the Chauvet cave in France, dated to approximately 36,000 years ago, ancient humans painted creatures that were part animal, part human, strange hybrids that don't exist in nature. A figure with the body of a man and the head of a bison. Creatures with multiple limbs, distorted shapes, blurred boundaries between animal and human form. Scientists and archaeologists believe these images were not simply artistic expression. Based on the deep hidden chambers where they were found, places that required crawling through narrow tunnels far from sunlight, many researchers now theorize these were ritual spaces, sacred places where early humans engaged with ideas. That frightened them. Ideas about beings that were almost human, but weren't. This is arguably the earliest evidence we have of monster making, and it tells us something chilling. The very first thing the human mind reached for, in its very first attempts to explain the world, was the idea of a creature that defied the natural order. As civilizations developed writing, the monsters became more specific. And the oldest written monsters in recorded history come from ancient Mesopotamia, from the region we now call Iraq, from a culture called Sumer, roughly 5,000 years ago. The Sumerians wrote about a creature called the Humbaba. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the oldest written stories in human history, Humbaba was a terrifying guardian of the cedar forest. Ancient texts describe him with a face made of coiling intestines, a roar like a flood, and breath like fire. He was appointed by the god Enlil to frighten away mortals. But what's interesting is not just the monster itself, it's the fear embedded in the story. Humbaba was a guardian, a punisher. He existed to enforce a boundary, a place where humans were not supposed to go. The monster, in this case, was a warning. Around the same period, Sumerian texts also describe creatures called the Udug, demonic beings that caused disease and madness. They were invisible, they were everywhere, and they could not be reasoned with. Ritual clay tablets containing instructions for exorcising these demons have been found by archaeologists and are now housed in museums across the world. These weren't metaphors to the people who wrote about them. These were real threats, real fears, real monsters, as real as anything in their world. Here is where things get strange, and this is not a theory. This is documented across cultures with no known contact with each other. In ancient India, the Vedic texts, some of the oldest religious writings on Earth, describe creatures called the Rakshasas, shapeshifters, beings who could appear human but were something deeply wrong underneath. They ate flesh. They walked at night. They had no place in the natural order. In ancient China, some of the earliest mythological records describe the Tao Ti, a monstrous face, just a face, with no body, that represented ravenous, uncontrollable hunger. It appeared on ritual bronze vessels dating back over 3,000 years. In ancient Egypt, the Amit, part lion, part hippopotamus, part crocodile, a devourer of souls who waited in the underworld for those who had lived badly. Across ancient Mesoamerica, in the myths of cultures that had no contact with the old world, creatures that demanded blood sacrifice, that wore human skins, that existed at the edge of the world where human civilization ended. In every single case, across 6 continents, across thousands of years, the earliest monsters share the same core features. They cross boundaries, they are hybrids of natural things, they are hungry, and they punish humans for going where they shouldn't go. This is not coincidence. This is something rooted in the human mind itself. Now here is the disturbing part, the part that changes how you see every monster story you've ever heard. Cognitive scientists and evolutionary psychologists have spent decades studying why monsters exist in human culture. And the most compelling theory, supported by significant research, is this: the monsters aren't imaginary. They're memories. Think about that for a moment. For hundreds of thousands of years before modern civilization, early humans were not at the top of the food chain. We were prey. We were hunted by giant cats, by wolves, by hyenas, by crocodiles. We slept in the open. We moved through darkness. And we survived, not because we were stronger, but because we were better at being afraid. The human brain developed what researchers call a hyperactive agency detection system. In simple terms, when something moved in the dark, it was survival instinct to assume it was a predator. The humans who assumed the worst survived. The ones who didn't. But here is the chilling part. Fossil evidence suggests that early humans, our direct ancestors, also shared the African continent with other human species. Homo heidelbergensis. The Denisovans, Homo naledi, creatures that walked upright, that used tools, that looked almost human. Almost. Some researchers, and this is a developing theory, not settled science, have proposed that the universal fear of creatures that are almost human but wrong may be rooted in lived experience, in genuine encounters with other human species across tens of thousands of years of overlap. Beings that looked like us, moved like us, but were something else. If that theory is correct, then the very first monsters humans ever imagined were not imagined at all. They were neighbors. Every civilization in human history has kept the monsters alive. That much is clear. But why? Why didn't monsters disappear as humans became more sophisticated, more scientific, more rational? The answer, researchers suggest, is that monsters serve a function. They always have. In ancient cultures, monsters marked the edge of the known world. They lived in the wilderness, in the deep ocean, in the underworld. They were guardians of places that were genuinely dangerous. The dark forest, the flood, river, the desert with no water. Telling your children there was a monster in the deep water wasn't a lie. It was survival wisdom, dressed in a story form that a child's brain could remember. Monsters also enforced social order. In nearly every ancient culture, the monsters punished specific human behaviors: greed, hubris, transgression, breaking sacred laws. The Humbaba punished those who entered forbidden forests. The Amit devoured those who lived without virtue. The Rakshasa hunted the corrupt and the impure. Monsters were, in a very real sense, the original justice system. The idea that there was something out there that would punish the wicked when no human authority could. And perhaps most powerfully of all, monsters gave humans a way to process the things they couldn't explain: disease, disaster, the death of children, the failure of crops, the madness that sometimes came over a person with no warning. Before science, these things needed an author, and the mind reached instinctively for a face. Consider this as you close this video tonight. Every culture that has ever existed on this earth, without a single exception, has had monsters. Not as entertainment, not as fiction, as living, breathing parts of their reality, as real as the sun, as real as hunger, as real as death. We like to think of ourselves as a species that has moved beyond that we've turned on the lights and chased the monsters away. But the same cognitive systems that built those first monsters, the hunger for pattern, or the terror of the unknown, the need to put a face on what we don't understand, are still running inside every human brain on Earth right now. We haven't outgrown our monsters. We've just changed what they look like. The first monsters humans ever imagined were born from the darkness at the edge of the firelight, from the sound in the forest with no name, from the shape at the edge of human experience that we could not understand and could not control. And if you are completely honest with yourself, in the deepest, darkest part of the night when the world goes quiet, you know exactly what that feels like, because you have always known. We all have. If this story reached something deep in you, if you want more journeys into humanity's forgotten past, its oldest mysteries and its darkest histories, subscribe to Mythic Origins. The stories we tell will not let you sleep easy, but they will make you see the ancient world and yourself in ways you never expect.